So the first post we're going to talk about is fake morality. This one is, if you're... Gosh, that's weird. I was about to say, if you're familiar with New Atheism, you're already kind of familiar with this thing. But on the other hand, there's some youngins out there now who weren't around for the New Atheism.
That was after some people's time, yeah. Weird.
And I think I've asked this before when, because a lot of these posts are around the age of the whatever atheism wars online. Mm-hmm. Is that still happening?
Not really.
That's kind of a relief. I think that basically
changed. Now it's culture wars instead of atheism wars. The wokeism took the place of Christianity, and the membership drastically changed as people resorted themselves.
Yeah, I guess at the very least, I feel like this was a fun time to be online, but I can't imagine there's anything new that's been brought to the conversation in the last 15 years. Right? So,
we found new evidence that God does not exist.
Right. I guess ultimately, it is kind of open and shut, so it had to move on to something like, a culture war where you can just yell at other people for being bad, and there is no objective, look, God doesn't exist kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, anyways, let's get into the actual post.
Yeah, so suppose Omega, of the famous guy who's so helpful with all those boxes he keeps throwing at us, makes you a credible threat that if you ever step inside a bathroom between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. in the morning, he'll kill you. Would you be panicked by the prospect of Omega withdrawing his threat? Would you cower in existential terror and cry, if Omega withdraws his threat, then what's going to keep me from going to the bathroom?
Which is very much a reflection of people who say if God didn't exist, what would stop people from killing and murdering and stealing and raping and all that?
Or more specifically, the threat of hell.
Yes.
Or God punishing you.
Yeah. And he says, which is to say, the very fact that a religious person would be afraid of God withdrawing its threat to punish them from committing murder shows that they have a revulsion of murder which is independent of whether God punishes murder or not. You don't hear them using the argument, if we did not fear hell and yearn for heaven, then what would stop people from eating pork? Which should sound just as forceful.
It's interesting because, back in the days of watching these debates online, occasionally you'd see people who would say that. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, no, if God didn't exist, I'd do whatever I want. And then that kind
of... They were always Christians.
That's the kind of... Oh yeah, because the rest of us, we're not that concerned about God existing or mandating morality, and we're nice to people and don't murder them because we like people. And so the people who are like, oh yeah, I would rape and murder with abandon if God wasn't real. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to back away slowly while I keep my eyes on you as I leave the room.
I also usually don't believe them.
Yeah, I feel like that's dogma. Yeah. They're trying to make the point that everyone would.
Yeah, I guess they just don't realize what a stupid point that is.
Yeah.
Another quote that was pulled out here, should...
that's not a quote. I should have put a little more context on it. This was a thing to consider because he's talking about fake morality. He's expanding the point a little bit. He asks to consider two philosophers who come to you with these two arguments and consider them for a second. One of them says...
you should be selfish because when people set out to improve society, they meddle in their neighbors' affairs and pass laws and seize control and make everyone unhappy. I can just hear David just grinning. Take whichever job that pays the most money. The reason the job pays more is that the efficient market thinks it produces more value than its alternatives. Take a job that pays less, and you're second-guessing what the market thinks will benefit society most.
And the other one says, you should be altruistic, because the world is an iterated prisoner's dilemma, and the strategy that fares best is tit for tat with initial cooperation. People don't like jerks. Nice guys really do finish first. Studies show that people who contribute to society have a sense of meaning in their lives are happier than people who don't. Being selfish will only make you unhappy in the long run. And, I don't know, maybe pause the podcast now and think about them for a second.
Yeah.
But then, once you have unpaused the podcast, you can continue listening to us.
So, the first philosopher is using strictly pro-social criteria to justify his recommendations. To him, what validates an argument for selfishness is showing that selfishness benefits everyone. The second philosopher appeals strictly to individual and hedonic criteria. To him, what validates an argument for altruism is showing that altruism benefits him as an individual.
Isn't that crazy? One of them is arguing for selfishness, but it's the altruistic argument that being selfish is what helps everybody the best. And the other one is arguing for altruism, but he's using the selfish argument that it'll help you to be altruistic.
I mean, the thing that he doesn't point out I mean, he does, but yeah, studies who show people who contribute to society have a sense of meaning in their lives and are happier than people who don't. I would overemphasize that point, or at least reemphasize it.
Right.
Like, as Harry so desperately tried to convince Voldemort, like, being nice makes people happy, assuming you're not brain damaged like Voldemort was.
But it is a selfish argument, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would sort of, like, call out
selfish in air quotes, not in the traditional use of the word.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, like, that already sort of presupposes selfishness as a vice, where if you're a utilitarian, you count as somebody. So if you're making yourself happy and other people happy, that's just on net more happiness. I don't see the issue. But some people just, I don't know. Some people being like, I have this really bad problem from my early childhood of, like, actually deeply, selfishness is the worst. You know, like, pride is the worst. So trying to have any kind of self-love or self-regard is hard when, like, you've sort of been taught to squint at that your whole life.
Oh, especially it can be overwhelming because there's only one you and there's a whole lot of other people. And so, the mass of their combined desires outweighs your own, right? But, like,
I don't think that it works that way.
No.
But yeah, well, okay. I think I brought up about how, like, Eudolons sort of live in that person's experience, but that's beside the point. We're trying to figure out which of these people is the actual altruist. And then, who wants to read the answer?
Whichever one actually holds the door open for little old ladies.
Right.
And it's hard to see, in the first case, why, the one that talks about, the efficient market, picking a job and all that stuff, why would that person hold open a door for a little old lady? That little old lady can't really reciprocate holding the door open for you, given the premise of the argument, right?
Right.
So, do you do it because your peers are watching and you get, social perks? No, if you're alone and you see someone who needs help, you do it because you're nice and it makes you feel good.
I mean, I'm sure this was brought up by his interlocutor in Fake Selfishness, but I've heard similar things where people basically argue for standard altruistic morality, but frame it entirely in terms of selfishness. It was a big thing for Ayn Rand and her followers at the time to be like, look, if you were perfectly selfish, you would be this great person that gives to charity and helps ladies across the street all the time, which was a little, I mean, not literally true because they had a thing about charities and whatever, but like it ended up being that you live your life the same way anyone else would as a good person.
You remember Brandon, my other groomsman that you met?
Yeah. He's got a similar thing, right?
Well, he was moving from Omaha to San Diego a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And he was, I was like, it's going to be quite the drive. And he's like, yeah, I just bought Atlas Shrugged to listen to on the drive. And I'm like, oh, so you want to fall asleep and crash your car? And he's like, no, actually, it's riveting. He's read it before.
Yeah, I have too. I really do like it.
Awesome, yeah.
I mean, I know it's not for everybody, but I found it very enjoyable.
Well, I asked you about that because I think you had said once that it was like one of the most important books that you've ever read. And then you were like, I'd asked you about that, and you were like, I don't recommend you read it.
Right.
And apparently it was for you at the time that you needed it, and that's awesome. Yeah.
They, I think, mentioned that in Methods of Rationality. We talked about that before too, where it's like Ron Weasley is one of the people who could possibly benefit from this. Right. I haven't read it. I think I might also be the kind of person that could benefit from it.
I think
somebody who already has really low self-worth, self-esteem. Like,
I have a copy on my bookshelf. Would you like to borrow it?
Yeah.
All right.
Got God of War from Steven. I'm getting Ayn Rand from Ineos. It's just like Christmas up in here.
Nice.
So you get to be a god and realize that you should be a god. Perfect.
I was hoping somebody would tie this together.
Cool.
All right.
So that is...
What was that sequence?
Yep. The next one is fake optimization criteria.
I had a brief thought experiment on fake morality.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. It was just, I didn't put it in the notes, but the fake morality... more broadly, is just like bad sources of like where to get your ethics, right? Mm-hmm. And I just remembered that there's a really good intuition pump from Dan Dennett, who I think coined the term intuition pump.
Did he? Cool.
At least he popularized it. But it was like the thought experiment was like, well, I've got my friend Jeff. I ask him what I should do. And well, why do you trust Jeff? Well, he's usually right about stuff. And like he's just got this nice, he's like a Santa Claus vibe, not just the beard, but also like in his joviality, Dan Dennett.
Santa Claus / like Socrates.
Yeah, Socrates is probably the one you'd prefer more. Mm-hmm. But
he's got the jolliness, whereas I hear Socrates was asked by a student, how can I become wise? And he held his head underwater until he was almost drowning, pulled him out and said, when you want wisdom as much as you want that air, then you will become wise.
Jesus.
I think Dan Dennett would probably not do that.
Probably not.
I think that was Socrates. It might have been Aristotle, but anyway.
In any case, I just liked that the idea of why would you trust this source? And, yeah, sure, maybe it's been credible to you in the past, but, what if Jeff says something counterintuitive to you? Shouldn't you second guess it? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's kind of like just an authority thing too, but especially on questions that you're equipped to kind of look at yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And most people don't need if I want to go figure out what I really believe to be the age of the universe, it'd take me a lifetime of research and equipment, right?
Right.
If I really want to figure out what my stance is on capital punishment, I can kind of do that by myself with my eyes closed in my own house,
Really?
I can't.
I think you would.
Looking at data
you should
helps.
Talk with other people too.
Or at least, get facts about it.
And looking at data would help too, but I can draw a lot of my conclusions from whatever I realize my first principles are in ethics. You know? I won't stick by that, my original phrasing of that too hard, but I do think that many of us are equipped to answer a lot of these questions pretty well.
I think that probably your first intuition is right if you're pretty well calibrated on ethics already.
I think you guys are nuts.
But I was going to say, also, you might come to the same conclusion, but like it's still super worth looking, facts about it and talking to people because there's stuff you may not have known or ways of thinking about it that you may not have thought of before.
New arguments and new information for sure. I mean, I guess what I meant is like if you leave your meta-ethical axioms open to revision, but once you have those, like suffering is bad, making people happy is good, you can kind of draw where a lot of like the answers to ethical quandaries, quote unquote, just from those, right? I mean,
okay, so suffering is bad is kind of a given, but like, I think trusting your intuitions or even having intuitions will generally help most people get along just fine in their society. But I also think that societies can often be fucked up and wrong. And I just think, a statement like, yeah, your initial intuitions will probably get you most of the way there all the time is just completely crazy because everybody in history ever could and probably did say that. And I think all of them were wrong, and we're probably wrong about stuff right now, too.
There is the sort of pejorative of armchair psychology.
This is armchair morality. I'll briefly summarize why this is on my mind, because on the drive to Comedy Works yesterday, I was talking with my wife about, she works with a lot of nurses who are anti-euthanasia. And I'm totally fine with any particular medical practitioner saying I don't feel like participating in whatever
hospice
thing.
Workers, right?
Yeah. So weird job to get into if you don't want to help people, help ease people's passing. But
I think they do, just not in that way.
In that particular way. But that's the weird thing. So the reason I said that I think you can get most of the way there from like just logically following what you actually believe about ethics is that, these nurses who she knows that will claim like, no, I think it should be illegal. This is terrible. I don't think that they actually believe that given their other beliefs about morality. Like, if you think that suffering is bad and you think that helping your patients is good, letting them, drown in their own vomit over the course of I don't know, however, die an agonizingly long, slow death or something. Yeah. You're actually causing harm. Yeah. Or you're allowing harm to happen. Maybe the action there.
Spend the last few weeks of your life with severe dementia.
Right.
Upset, confused all the time, and upsetting the entire family by having to interact with their dying relative who doesn't remember them.
Yeah, and like, have these nurses never had like a sick pet that like, look, Sparky had a great run, but
his life is like 99% pain right now.
Right, and it's going to go on for another 2 months maybe, or it can end peacefully here. Like many people have been in a situation where they've had to make the hard decision to ease a pet's passing, right? And so I guess what I'm getting at is that with these nurses, I suspect their actual complaint isn't that like I'm harming the patient. I think it's coming from another source of
I think
like,
it's the strong like anti-killing, anti-death probably.
Or if it's anti-death, they're in the wrong line of work. If it's anti-killing, maybe I think it's from some religious just
suicide
shoving
is
its way in there.
It's like a ticket straight to hell, apparently.
Yeah.
That always like just going on a small tangent about how religion was super confusing to me even as a child. It's like, so you're gonna be born into this world of suffering, and then you gotta like live a good life regardless of all these obstacles we put in your way and random shit happening all the time. And then you are judged and get to heaven, but where you'll like live in eternal bliss. And it's like, well, why don't we just, skip that whole part? Just kill every baby as soon as it comes out of the womb or whatever, and then we all go to heaven. And it's like, they had to, it was a necessary
adaptation.
Yeah, rule that they kind of had to stick in there to make sure that people don't just commit suicide left and right when life is miserable.
And I mean,
like, we want people to believe this lie that there's this like land of infinite bliss that you go to after you die, so you don't feel bad about your own death and you want to do good things.
But we don't want them to believe it's so hard that they stop working here and paying taxes and shit.
It seems so obviously designed by human societies to benefit human societies that like. It's just like, why would God, if there was such a thing as a God, why would he care about, first of all, this, and then secondly, like, what foods you eat, what fabrics you wear, which sex positions you're allowed to use, how you display the entrails of sacrificed animals. Check out that Old Testament shit.
I really think that the nurses probably very strongly do believe that euthanasia is wrong, and, I don't think you could convince them with the reasoned argument. I would imagine that it probably happened because it's a good, it's good to have a prohibition on euthanasia that people don't choose from themselves, because then you can be like, oh yeah, that person obviously needs to be euthanized, and power can be abused, and then, that's spread to a whole, all euthanasia is wrong no matter what kind of thing.
Slippery slope came up.
Okay. I was going to say,
but right now, you can't, like I can with my pet, I can't say, look, my sick relative, they really want to die, but they won't be able to tell you that.
Right.
That's not how, euthanasia works.
That's actually one of my big fears, that by the time I'll be, need to be put down, I'll be so gone mentally that I won't know it, and I'll just be hanging around, burdening the people I love for however many years, and not living any life worth living.
Don't worry about it. We're going to live forever.
That's sort of I anticipate that aging in 50 years will be different than it is now, so.
But I mean, these nurses have that intuition, and it may have been adaptive in a certain sense, and trusting that intuition actually leads to a lot of suffering.
Yeah.
That's my point. So I think that, but from what their, actual axioms about what they believe about suffering and, their duty as a medical practitioner, I think that their conclusion, we should never help a patient ease their passing, I think that doesn't follow, right?
It's not coming from first principles. It reminds me of politics too, where if you're for gun control, then you should be against abortion, sort of,
They might be able to make a counter argument about the lines of, this is actually why it should be illegal, in all cases, because the net suffering that it prevents by making it illegal is worth the sacrifice of a few people having to live a couple years in pain.
Maybe. I didn't want to get us too far down a rabbit hole, I guess. And so you have convinced me. I will do your ethics with your eyes closed in your bedroom. I will withdraw that. I'll put that up there much more tentatively and less confidently than I did initially.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to fake optimization criteria.
Yes.
I think the main point of this one is, and this first sentence is great because every single word is a different link to a post that he did earlier, where he's like, yes, I hammer on about this a lot, and scrolling over those links with my mouse, I was like, wow, we've read quite a few, and I don't remember half of these. This is terrible. But he's the main thrust being, our beliefs appear to match the evidence much more strongly than they actually do. If we could beat this fundamental meta-bias and see what every hypothesis really predicted, we would be able to recover from almost any other error of fact. And I think that's kind of the main endpoint goal of Eliezer and rationality.
Yeah, I was going to say this is a perfect tie into the subject because it already lays it out here, but let's get more into this.
He says, our beliefs appear to match evidence much more strongly than they actually do. Mm-hmm. I think what it means is our beliefs appear to us to match the evidence.
Appear. We think that they do, yeah.
I just wanted to make that crystal clear.
Yeah.
All right.
That if we could actually see things without bias.
And then we get into some decision theory.
Yeah.
The mirror challenge for decision theory is seeing which option a choice criterion really endorses. We seem to have evolved a knack for arguing that practically any goal implies practically any action, which is inconvenient for rationality.
Yeah, and he like then goes on to say, but obviously there's complications. Like, where could you possibly find something that isn't hopelessly complicated? He asks,
or sort of from the inside, how can you use a brain that's like miscalibrated in this way to figure out how to calibrate your own brain correctly when you're brains fixing brains, or trying to see brains.
The direct quote is, where is the standardized, open source, generally intelligent, consequentialist optimization process into which we can feed a complete morality as an XML file to find out what that morality really recommends when applied to our world?
XML.
Drum roll.
Don't like the XML, huh?
It's gross.
Okay.
I laughed when I saw that, but anyway.
It was great, yeah. Which is, what we were just saying about what would, the suffering applied to our world really say about the euthanasia thing. And I honestly think that we should allow euthanasia, but whatever, we're not going to that.
So it seems like it should be some kind of AI, but in fact...
He says, it's our old friend the alien god, of course.
Yay.
Natural selection is guaranteed free of all mercy, all love, all compassion, all aesthetic sensibilities, all political factionalism, and etc. He goes on for a while about what is free of.
It's free from lots of things.
Yes, because all it really cares about is how many grandchildren survive.
Now you might ask, are these case histories of evolutionary science really relevant to human morality? I ask in return, if we can't clearly see the result of a single monotone optimization criterion, if we can't even train ourselves to hear a single pure note, how will we ever listen to an orchestra? How will we see that always be selfish, or always obey the government, are poor guiding principles for human beings to adopt, if we think that even optimizing genes for inclusive fitness will yield organisms which sacrifice reproductive opportunities in the name of social resource conservation?
Mm-hmm.
And then, to train ourselves to see clearly, we need simple practice cases. And then that's the end of that one, but it goes into the next one, which we'll do next time, I guess.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
I actually kept reading. Uh-huh. I mean, I was reading these in preparation for the show, and I was just like, oh yeah, these are good.
Mm-hmm.
I find myself, I keep doing that, before doing the podcast, I read ahead.
Yeah. That's an interesting claim about decision theory. I mean, basically what he's saying is that humans can't do decision theory correctly due to our inherent biases, right? Because we may have a decision theory, but we don't apply it correctly to see what it really endorses.
Well, we can't do mental math well enough, and we're also already hardwired for social tribalism.
Yeah. Going along with our society and our loved ones.
And evolution driving us to, reproduce more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we can do better than what we've evolved to do and what society, what we've been doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can be less wrong, maybe, if we put in the effort. But it's not there's different, I guess, maybe it can't be perfect because our squishy meat brains aren't perfect calculators, but we can be better at it than we historically have been.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ideally, we can, learn this martial art of rationality, but also we can tinker with, the source code eventually.
I think the scary part behind all this is that if an AI makes decisions in the world, it's going to be using some sort of decision theory. And if we program it with a decision theory that we think is, all about make the humans happy and successful and fulfilled in life, but we have these natural blinders that keep us from seeing what a decision theory actually recommends, we program the AI with it, and the AI is like, sweet! Now we got to make a lot of paper clips! and then bad things happen.
Paperclip the universe?
Yeah.
There's no more suffering, everything's paperclips.
Right. Which obviously, I mean, that would be one of the early ones that we would weed out, but the fact that it's so hard to actually tell what a decision theory actually recommends for us means that we have to be incredibly fucking careful giving a decision theory to an AI, because once it's running off with the decision theory we gave it, we might not be able to stop it.
And there's weird repugnant conclusions that come from a bunch of different philosophies, utilitarianism being one.
Well, yeah. Okay.
That's why we're donating to Miri and whatnot,
mm-hmm.
so they can solve that hard problem.
Hopefully. So for next time, the 2 sequence posts we're going to read, these are both big ones. Adaptation-Executers, not fitness maximizers, which I still see brought up now and then. And the ever-dreaded, Wes is going to kill everybody, Evolutionary Psychology.